Alright y'all, back again, and today we're going to be ranking a tier list for the new subclasses in Baldur's Gate 3 for patch 8, the stress test. So technically these classes are not released yet, so things could still change. But I just kind of wanted to throw out my initial impressions of these new subclasses after going through all 12 of them. Now for this tier list, these subclasses, I'm going to be weighing them based off of the 1 to 12, sticking with that subclass. So not going to be factoring in too much multi-classing. And one last disclaimer before we get into the list, every one of these subclasses is viable to play in Baldur's Gate 3 on every difficulty. If I rank something low, it's just because maybe I don't gravitate to its playstyle, and I just probably don't think it's very good overall. But that doesn't mean if you enjoy something that it's bad. Now, gee, Nomad, that makes this a very subjective list. Am I right? Yes, this is a very subjective list. But let's go ahead and get started. So in the list here, we're going to go in alphabetical order. So the first one we're going to start with is Barbarian, and they got Path of the Giant for the new subclass. I'm going to immediately throw it into A tier. Now you can see how these tier lists are broken down for me. S is going to be my top pick. I'm going to put one of basically the A tier subclasses in S tier at the end of the video. And when it comes to S tier, I like to be really picky, and it has to be really something special to be in my S tier. But of course, something has to be an S tier. So that's what S tier is to me. A tier is just amazing. I think it's firing on all cylinders when it comes to its class fantasy and how it plays in game. And then B tier, just a solid subclass overall. Maybe one part of it is lacking, say the class fantasy for me. And so then I'll put something in B tier. And then C tier is going to be a little bit more niche, where maybe the class fantasy is just not doing it for me, and the playstyle I'm just not vibing with, but I could also see how it could be effective. And then D tier is just something I'm completely not a fan of. I don't like the class fantasy, I don't like the way it plays, and it's just not something I gel with. So that's how the tier list break down. But let's get back to Barbarian there, Path of the Giants. So this subclass is very simple, very effective, and it basically ticks all the boxes. The gameplay for this subclass is very straightforward, nothing flashy. You throw weapons, you kick targets, or you throw targets. That playstyle is already very strong in Baldur's Gate 3, so they just basically made a subclass that's centered purely around just throwing your weapon, throwing enemies, and again, kicking them. The animations, the way it plays, everything's really good. I just really don't think there's anything wrong with Path of the Giant. So basically, easy A tier. Next up, we have College of Glamour for the Bard. This one, I think, goes straight into D tier. Not a fan of this subclass at all. Now, I'm not judging this off of the base Bard kit, because every Bard gets that. It's what does this subclass do and what makes it special, or in this case, what makes it not special. So for this subclass, I mean, honestly, bards have 3 other really good subclasses. Obviously, College of Swords is amazing. And I think the most disappointing part about College of Glamour is the Mantle of Majesty and the Mantle of Inspiration, the 2 class actions this subclass gets. Let's talk about Inspiration first. It's the fact that it's supposed to have you, first off, it does give you your whole party temporary hit points. That's really good. That's nice. That's a nice addition. I'm not going to downplay that's basically a nice bit of almost like healing or survivability. But it's the second fact that if they are then hit with a melee weapon, that target then is charmed. But what they don't tell you in the tooltip is range attacks, spell attacks, as long as something else hits whatever target has Mantle of Inspiration and takes off those temporary hit points, the entire buff, the Mantle of Inspiration, gets taken off. It's a very strict playstyle that relies on a melee attacker to hit you. So that class action already not doing it for me. And the next one, the Mantle of Majesty. This one gives you a command ability for a bonus action, but you can only use it once per long rest. And the cherry on top is the fact that it is a concentration. Now, nobody asked me while I was doing the leveling, like, no, Matt, why did the first time you leveled that, why did you pick all these concentration abilities? Well, it was because here's how I thought it was going to play. I thought it was going to be a super control bard, as in I was going to go into a fight, I was going to use my action to do a big, AoE, a confusion, a hold person, something like that. And then I would use my bonus action with the Mantle of Majesty here to basically pick up any stragglers or maybe disarm a really threatening target. So I thought that's the playstyle I was going to go into. But once I found out that bonus action, the Mantle of Majesty command, was a concentration, it just totally deflated the subclass for me entirely. And I've thought about that a little bit more, and maybe subclass wise, you pick up that command, the normal command spell, and you could do double commands. But yeah, this was a huge disappointment for me. Not a fan. I don't gravitate towards it at all. I don't like the mechanics and I don't like the class fantasy. So that's why it's going to sit in D tier. And next up we have Cleric and their Domain of Death. I really like this subclass. It kind of plays a lot with being a melee cleric, but also gives you range options as well. And it all centers around necrotic damage and then your necromancy cantrips. Now I'm struggling to where to put this. I'll put it in B tier for right now. And I do want to put it in A tier, but so the struggle is the fact that it's got these range options, it's got these melee options. So if I build into the range options, well then I have all these subclass features for melee that I'm never really going to utilize. But then if I go into the melee option, well, clerics don't get extra attack. So that can kind of feel bad. I am going to leave this in B tier, but I really do like this domain. I feel like it has great multi-class potential as well. But for this list, we're really just going to try to stick strictly with the subclass and the subclass alone. And at the end, when I do put something in S tier, I may do a reshuffling as well to kind of see how everything kind of falls into place. But let's move on. Next up is Druid, and that is a Circle of Stars. This goes into A tier. I'm putting it above the Barbarian subclass. Circle of Stars is, I love it. I love it so much. This one is probably the one that surprised me the most. You pick your starry form, and it's three really good starry forms. You got your archery, you got the chalice, and then you've got dragon. And those all give you a bonus action, damaging spell, or another support in the case of the chalice. All without costing a spell slot, by the way. You just have to use your wild shape charge to change into whatever form. I think this is really strong as a spell caster. It only gets better as you level up into it. And later on, you get the improved version where it does a little bit more damage. And the dragon version, the Dazzling Breath, also gets a damage bump, even though in the tooltip, it doesn't mention that. So that dragon form it's really strong. That conal little AoE there, that spray, it's really, I love it. I love the whole kit with the Circle of Stars here. And another little nuance that you guys all pointed out to me was if you start off in dragon form or archery, and then you do your bonus action to attack, you can then switch to the chalice form, do a action heal, and then the chalice heal will proc, so you can do that as well. So that's almost like 3 actions, no haste, nothing special like that, just all within the own kit. So very strong. I really dig the Circle of Stars. And if you can't tell, this is already this is probably a potential for S tier for me. But we got to finish the list. So let's move on. And next up we have Arcane Archer. Now I'm going to put it in B tier because it's very, I would say, narrow focused. You just use ranged weapons to get some, I would say, admittedly nice range effects. I like the Feyfire edition that can't miss and puts on Fairy Fire, Seeking Arrow. You got a banish option as well, and these archery charges that come back on short rest. There's no denying that's strong, but it does pigeonhole you into basically only being this magical archer, which the fantasy's there. I think the fantasy nails it. It's just the viability and what I gravitate towards. It might feel a little restrictive, but don't let that put you off about this subclass. I do like it a lot. I do think it's solid. But if you look at what Battlemaster can do, Battlemaster does the same thing as where it has these range conditional options, but also you got things like riposte with your maneuvers and then the melee focus as well. So you can basically be everything with a Battlemaster. Whereas Arcane Archer, it just sticks to its own thing there, which is completely fine. But that's why I'm putting it into B tier. And next up we have Monk, the Drunken Master. Really like the animations for this. I didn't mention with any other the subclass, but the animations that they added to the game for these new subclasses, really top notch. They really just kind of freshen up the experience, I should say. But Drunken Master here. I'm not sure this one's even working fully as intended, but I really like the class fantasy. I'm sticking it in B tier for now, probably ahead of Arcane Archer. But there are things in Baldur's Gate 3, there are pieces of equipment that synergize with this play style. I just wish this subclass inherently got more buffs for being actually drunk, instead of how it is where you are getting other targets drunk and building up this life of the party to then kind of do like a finishing style of play. So I basically want them to tweak this one a bit to make that life of the party a little bit more effective. But the animations are great. That's all really cool. I really dig that. I'm gonna stick it. I'm gonna keep it in B tier, and maybe it'll shuffle around because I do like that class fantasy a lot. Now let's move on to Paladin, Oath of the Crown. I love this one. I love it a lot. It is this Paladin tank. Finally, I feel like a real struggle in Baldur's Gate 3 was having this martial character that was like that felt like an actual tank. Now, admittedly, that playstyle I would say is not that desirable. Damage is king always, I feel like in these types of games, but now we have a tank option and it feels great. We pick up Spirit Guardians, we get Warding Bond, the Paladin Oath, that AoE taunt, and you get a heal as well. We get a reaction ability to basically tank somebody's damage. This is great. This is a class, subclass here that goes fully into that fantasy, and I think pulls it off really well in game. I'm a huge Paladin fan, so already a contender for S tier, but let's save that for the end. Moving on to a class fantasy that I love, which is Ranger, but the subclass here is Swarmkeeper. I'm going to put Swarmkeeper in B tier. I think this is a very good subclass in the early game and mid game. Class fantasy, I don't like very much with the swarms. Now, if they would have added a bat form, maybe then this would be an A tier contender. But mechanically speaking, I think this is actually pretty strong. It's this mobile ranger that can put on these status effects, that you get an improved version of those status effects later on, as well as getting this little blink teleport that gives you +2 armor. You get this visual effect on you as well. This has got to go above Arcane Archer. Now do I think it's better than Drunken Master? This might just come down to, I think you could flip-flop these two depending on how much you like either one of these class fantasies. It's just I like the Drunken Master's class fantasy a little bit more, but I do see a lot of value in Swarmkeeper. So I'm going to keep it there for now, because another thing I'd like to see with this is the ability to change your swarm type basically out of combat. Maybe it costs a resource charge. I don't know, but having to basically change your swarm only while leveling. So if you hit level 12 and you want to change your swarm, well, you have to respec all the way. So that would really suck. That does really suck. But I really do. I think the Swarmkeeper is like the poster child of like a solid subclass. So easy B tier. Let's move on. Rogue. You got your dirty advantage, your rakish sneak attack there, and your panic, or as you guys like to say, panache.
Grazie. Corlomi? Lo pronuncio correttamente?
Sì, corretto.
Ancora una volta.
Golami.
Jokes aside, I'm going to put this in C tier because I think the class fantasy is actually pretty good, but I don't think this subclass basically gets it out of the shadow of the other rogue subclasses. And what do I mean by that? Well, it's really strong to early dip into rogue. It's just later on, it doesn't get anything, I would say, flashy or like fun like these other subclasses do. So basically, this is a great multi-class option, but if I'm basing it purely on the subclass, I think this basically just falls in line with the rest of the rogue subclasses, and it doesn't really move the needle up. And I will say, I think it's between this Swashbuckler and Thief as my favorite subclasses for rogue, and the style of play. So it's like you have to like almost like single out targets with the Swashbuckler and make sure you're not threatened. It really doesn't say that in the tooltip though. When you do get off your like flick of the wrist, it says you have advantage. It doesn't say you have advantage but not while you're threatened. So that kind of sucked, because there are plenty of things in the game that give you advantage, and they say they give you advantage, and then you can be threatened as well and you still have advantage. So I wish they would add that little tooltip in there, because that would really just drive home the fact that, okay, you want to be soloing out targets or making sure you're basically on your own and not threatened, kind of playing into that rogue playstyle to get these like big hits off. So yeah, there's a little bit of nuance to play with the playstyle. The class fantasy I do really like. It's just, yeah, I think it's that playstyle I'm not exactly gelling with. I've tried multiple attempts with this and I'm like, okay, it's strong because you do get a disarm. basically for free as a bonus action that doesn't cost a resource. And you also get other effects like a blind as well, and like a charm, again all for a bonus action. So that's really good. I'm sorry, it's not a charm. You get like a mockery. It gives them like disadvantage. You get like 3 choices there for like a status effect that's like virtually free, and it's just a bonus action. I'm wondering if I should move this up into B tier. That's what I'm contemplating right now. I'm gonna keep it in C tier for now. Maybe in the reshuffling I will move it. But let's move on. So next up we have Shadow Magic Sorcerer. I'm gonna go ahead and put this in S tier, and I'll show you guys why. It's a dog subclass, and we love dogs on this channel. Hi, baby. Say hi to everybody. So easy S tier, no problem. Best subclass in the game for the best dogs. Now, gee, Mr. Nomad, I saw in that giant video you kicked that wolf. So do you really like dogs? I do. I really regret that one. I'd lose sleep over still. But really, Shadow Magic Sorcery. I'm gonna put this in B tier for now. I think there's a lot of potential with this because it kind of breaks the mold of all the other sorcerers, where for the other sorcerers, you kind of save your sorcery points for meta magic. And for this subclass, once you get that hound at level 6, I feel like you're really freely using sorcery points and then kind of just like gaining them back at the same time. Like a revolving door of like sorcery points. Because something that I didn't mention in the in my guide video is the darkness spell you get that you use the sorcery points for. You basically get Devil's Sight with it as well, so you can see through magical and non-magical like darkness. So you really do kind of play into that, I would say, Warlock play style that they have, where you put down a darkness bubble and then you just sit inside that darkness bubble and do various sorts of damage. So they have added that to Sorcerer here. I like the Hound. I think there's a lot of actually potential with this subclass, because also the Hound multiplies every time they get hit. That can then just spiral out of control in a fight in your favor. When they put that debuff on a target, if anybody with if anybody matches that elemental type, could be a weapon attack, could be a cantrip, whatever, that sorcerer gets that point. I don't know. It's a very unique subclass, I should say, where it plays completely different than every other subclass that we have currently in Baldur's Gate 3. I don't know. I really like it. I can see why some people look at this and they're like, okay, and they don't really kind of gel with it. But I really do. I really do. I really like this. This is me kind of holding back from putting this into A tier because I can understand why people don't think this is like super great. I'm going to keep it in B tier. I might put this above Death Domain though, because again, I really like the playstyle and what it brings to the table. Yeah, this one's like borderline almost in A tier for me because of how unique it is. Let's leave it there for now and let's move on to Warlock. Now, Hexblade. Let's just go ahead and throw you all the way up here. Admittedly, you get a lot of great shit right early on. So Hexblade centers around basically having your own Pact of the Blade at level 1 and then just booming blade your way to victory. You do eventually pick up a Spectre that you summon that helps you in combat. It's really cool, does a fair bit of damage, playing with like the Hex Curse that you can either apply yourself or you get a chance of it every time you hit somebody with a melee attack. Hexblade is amazing. Hexblade's really cool. There's a clear reason why this is probably the most popular subclass out of all these new ones, or just maybe in the game. It's really strong. And yeah, Warlocks kind of just have that like no fucks given attitude. I'm really just debating is like, do I like this more than Circle of the Stars? I think I do. I think multi-classing wise, these two have a lot of great potential as well. And I give it a little bit of brownie points for their multi-class potential. I do think you just get cool shit with Hexblade throughout, you know, the leveling, and I think Warlocks are really cool. They're really good. But it really comes down to, because Circle of the Stars are more on that radiant damage side, and I usually gravitate towards that more often than I would say like dark magic, necrotic, stuff like that. I'm gonna bump it up over it, but just know, man, that's a tight race for me right now. That's a tight race. Let's move on to Wizard here and Bladesinger. Bladesinger goes straight into A tier. Goes above Giants. Does it go above Paladin? Yeah, probably. So the thing about Bladesinger is the play style, where you get a martial weapon of your choice. A lot of people didn't like that I picked longsword, but you know, hey, that you get that option and it can work. That was the whole point of me picking it. Anyways, but you're doing this like dance of, okay, using your melee weapon if you want to build up healing charges, and then using your spells, either an action spell or a bonus action spell like Misty Step, to then build up the damaging climax. And so you're doing this dance throughout the fights, and then at the end there you do this blade song climax that, you know, that will use both your healing charges and your damaging charges. It's a really fun, unique playstyle, kind of like how I was talking about with Shadow Magic, where this is the only subclass that kind of does it, and it's very unique. That's why it's sitting in A tier. Now, how viable is that? Because there is something that maybe we should discuss with this, which is most rounds, I would say, or encounters in Baldur's Gate 3 end in 1 to 2 rounds if you know what you're doing. So you kind of don't have a lot of time to build up these charges, and you can only do that in combat. So I could see some people looking at that and being like, not that big of a deal. But I just think the play style is so cool with this subclass, and it gives wizards basically a play style that they just haven't had yet. So that's why it's basically sitting in A tier so high. I could see people looking at how actually effective it is, and it's kind of very hard to break down like how much damage you're doing or all those rolls. It's not very clear in the log. I hope they clean that up. Really cool subclass, very much caught off guard. This and Circle of Stars here, these two just surprised the hell out of me. Shadow Magic too, because initially, yeah, I was just going to do the Paladin one, and I was going to do Arcane Archer and call it a day. I was really surprised by a lot of these. I'm feeling confident with that. Let me look these over, and then we'll see about a reshuffle and then crown an S tier king here. So as far as reshuffling, I actually think I did a pretty banger of a job here. Do I want to move Bladesinger down a peg though? Because, you know, it does suck to have a short and unsatisfying climax, but sometimes the foreplay is just as important. So yeah, I'm gonna keep it there. Nope, I'm pretty happy how I place these. This is kind of like how I feel about each of the subclasses. And then when it comes to my S tier, since I do tend to gravitate towards that more Paladin, Radiant side, I'm giving it to Circle of Stars here. And there's another reason for that. Later this week, I'm going to be making a build from patch 8, the stress test, that I think is going to be safe to take into live version. I don't think it's going to get changed at all. And it utilizes Circle of Stars. So that is why it's going into my S tier spot. Really like the play style. Hexblade, yeah, probably stronger, but sometimes it just comes down to the theme and how much fun you have playing it. I mean, we're splitting hairs here. We're splitting hairs. Not a big deal, but this one for right now, because this is going to be based on my next video, it gets the top tier spot. So now after all this has been done, you guys let me know your basically rankings. You can just give me your top 3 if you don't want to list all 12. And then going forward, we're going to start doing some builds that I think are going to be safe as far as balance and tweaks that are going to make it into the live version. So I am a little hesitant to do something based on Booming Blade at the moment, because I could see both arguments as far as keep it, and then maybe it's going to get tweaked or nerfed a little bit. I could see both arguments. I actually am leaning more towards the size of just keep it. It's so much fun, but you know, that's down to the developers. But yeah, so later this week, I will have that build out, and that's basically the video. Guys, if you made it this far, thank you so much. We hit over 2,000 subscribers in a much quicker fashion than I thought. My goal for 2025 for this channel was going to be to get to 2,000 subscribers, because that was last year's goal, was to get to 1,000. And this year I'm like, let's just make sure we get to 2,000. And we already blew that out of the water in basically a week. So thank you guys so much. I know right now this is a very exciting time for Baldur's Gate 3, so not going to expect this kind of reception unless something crazy happens. But I just wanted to let you guys know that I really appreciate the support that we gotten over this last week. And yeah, I will see you in the next video. Peace and take care.